Welcome to Living Truth. I'm Angela James. Together with John Usher, we invite you to dialogues designed to awaken you to truth, enlighten you to who you are, and to invite you to live a reality that you want. Good morning, everyone. Angela James from angelajames.co.za and Living Truth, and I am joined by
John Usher from mindmathematics.com, your brother from another mother.
I'm glad you're picking up that line today. John and I are having a huge amount of fun, and the learning and growth that we're experiencing as we are bringing these episodes through to you is just incredible. So, just to set a little bit of context, I know that we spoke last week about bringing you content on purpose today. And as John and I are going through our own journey, we discovered that there's a piece that we haven't dealt with in terms of identity. And in fact, there's a couple of pieces. I had a big piece shift in for me this morning around soul codes, consciousness emerging into identity, because I strongly believe that we come into this world with a soul contract, with a soul code that's embedded within us. And that is part and parcel of the universal consciousness. And that then, to use John's language, translates into our identity. So, John, your comments on that insight that we gained this morning?
Very excited about where we are going this morning. And to fill in, sometimes around identity, there is a positive and a negative. Maybe not negative, it's not quite the right term. There is a inevitability, because identity is a law. And the way I normally explain law in my class is gravity works. Gravity is a law, and it works whether you are aware of it working or not. So you use a pen. Most people don't realize they need the pen to make. They need gravity to make their pen work, because it's the gravity that's pulling the ink to the nib. Americans spent millions inventing a pen that could write in space. And then the competitors just took a pencil. Because
I love that. I so laughed when you told me about that. It was just.
So that's the positive side of the law working. The negative side is I've got a cup of coffee standing on my table. If I knock that over, it's going to fall to the floor and the cup's going to break. So I don't necessarily want it to, but there is an inevitability of that law functioning. And that's the same thing with identity. It's either going to work in your favor, you're going to do it consciously. That's why we talk about awareness and consciousness. Or it's going to be case, whatever will be. Yep. And you are going to live the consequences of identity haphazardly. So it's better to design it than to suffer under its effects.
Yep, and that's to be deliberate. And being conscious is about being deliberate. It is about being in the present. It is about being here and now. And it is about the awareness that as we are connect with our soul code, with our soul journey and purpose on the planet, so it becomes a consolidated, deliberate strategy of being able to live consciously, because that really is what it's all about. The identity molds and shapes who we are from a soul point of view and a consciousness point of view into living on the planet. And as we spoke about last week, we connected with the singularity of roles and that identity that gives us. And we also spoke about the multiplicity. I have to get my tongue around that word all the time. The multiplicity of roles that we are in our higher self and in our higher culture, our higher natures. And then there's that other part, which is the part that we want to bring you today, and that is about our pseudo identities. And when John and I were having this initial conversation, it was kind of like, if I'm not in my truth and I'm not in my identity, then what am I? And we could say that it's living a lie. We could say, or bring it, it's kind of a bit harsh, but we could be living a lie.
Yeah.
Or just being inauthentic to who we truly are. And so we've termed the phrase pseudo identities. Again, somebody, when somebody calls you being or calls you out for being phony or fake, what they're seeing is your pseudo identity. They're not seeing you in your truth, because that's what you're projecting to them. And that then brings in a whole nother layer of all sorts of interesting things. One is how we see ourselves. The other is how we engage and connect with others, where we have two identities coming together, like John and I having these two identities coming together in the work that we're doing. And then we have the pseudo identities that also emerge, and attached to all of those things can be things like codependence, kind of showing up inauthentically in the sense of becoming who others expect me to be, or I think they expect me to be, and the picture they have. Yeah. And I know you've got some brilliant stuff to talk about through that. And also it leads to a whole lot of dysfunction in the sense that, and those dysfunctions can come in the sense of financial challenges and difficulties, relationship difficulties, addiction, anything to fill the hole that we have created for ourselves, like the Kimberley big hole that we've dropped into because we've let go of our real truth and that truth of who we is, of who we are, who we is. Yo. So,
the singularity, John, who he is.
Yeah, who I is. I love that.
The multiplicity is who we are.
Yeah, no. Singularity is who I am, is me in my lower nature, as opposed to who we are in our higher nature. So, yeah, some interesting perspectives that have come up for us around identifying pseudo identities. So, yeah, John, you've got some really interesting stuff to cover and address around this.
So this is a topic that I've shared in class for many years, and it goes around the analogy that I did last week around the 18-wheeler truck. And just, if you haven't listened to that video, if you haven't listened to that podcast, go and listen to it. The truck represents our life, and the horse of the truck is representing our vision, our ambition, and dare I say it, our purpose. The trailer of the truck is all of our skills and abilities and memories and all that goes with that. And all the various wheels represent the roles that we play in life. So when we talk about identity or the multiplicity of identities, what we're saying is that this truck is on the road. It needs to get to a destination. That's to fulfill the purpose. In order to fulfill that purpose, we have all these wheels, and we want all those wheels, wheel alignment. If you know anything about vehicle wheel alignment's important. All the wheels have got to be pointing in the same direction, got to be the same size, ideally a similar tread, all that kind of thing. When we're talking about pseudo identities, it's like we've plucked off one of those wheels and we've put the spare tire on. And when I think of that spare tire, I think about the modern cars.
The biscuit.
When you open
the biscuit tire.
It's little biscuit tire. And on it's got a big red sticker. Do not exceed 80 kilometers an hour. Do not drive this for more than 500 or 1,000 kilometers. So that identity is stuck on, and we want to fulfill a function with it in order to get the results, and sometimes it's with good intentions. You want to foster a good relationship with somebody. You want to make sure you have good outcomes. So we are picking these roles and we are putting these pseudo tires on in order to fulfill a function. Yeah. And they may fulfill a function for a time. The problem is when we try to extend that function. We want to continue that function.
Yeah. The danger of those, when we take on those impermanent roles, because they're not permanent, is that when we make them permanent, when we carve them out as what we think is our true identity. And a great example for me is when we go and work for an organization and a corporate, and they have a certain culture and a certain identity, and there's very little to no accommodation of the individual identity. You have to become one of the clones of the organization, as opposed to being seen as somebody who can add value through the very identity that you bring in. And it's where this kind of cloning happens within organizations that we start to, and I know I've experienced it, where we start to lose ourselves in the culture, and we lose the sense of who we are, who we truly are. So if you've ever felt like you've pushed a boulder up a hill and keep getting flattened, that's a really good analogy for me when I am really not in my truth, when I've taken on somebody or something else's identity. I'm trying to mold myself. It's very typically that still, you know, when we're trying to hammer a round peg into a square hole, it's very typically that leaves me coming away from those engagements and those connections, feeling a little bit bereft sometimes, feeling inauthentic, feeling that there's something off, wonky, like the wonky wheel. And what that's cluing me into is, if I'm brave enough to see it, for starters, is that something's not working. I have lost sight of the higher order me and merged into, and I've done it in relationships and friendships as much as I've done it within being in an organization. Comes from
Absolutely.
people pleasing, codependence, and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So, and I think that that's what you're alluding to with the wonky wheel. You want to talk a little bit more about the wonky wheel?
Yeah. So, we adapt an identity that is not necessarily a true reflection of who we are in order to achieve an outcome. So the discussion that we were having this morning was around the ex-wife, and she had an expectation. We were working towards what I thought was a common goal, and she had an expectation for me to show up in a certain way, which uh, I wanted to, for the sake of the relationship, I wanted to. But the more I was showing up in that identity, the more I was realizing that wasn't truly who I was. It was a function that I've adopted in order to make somebody happy. I was trying to make it a permanent part of my life, but it wasn't just true to who I was. Now, the thing with that is, it becomes hard work for me, becomes effort for me. So I'm going to get the burnout. I'm going to get worn out. I'm not operating in flow. This is not in alignment with my purpose, with my integrity, with my character. So it became hard work. That's your analogy of rolling the rock up the hill. And when
Yep.
you get to the point you can't anymore and you collapse, then it rolls over the top of you, and you have to go and get it again at the bottom of the hill and start rolling it back up.
Mm.
And this was what was happening in the relationship. Is I'm
And
now
it's
forcing the rock
exhausting.
up the hill.
It's
Yeah,
absolutely
it's
exhausting.
exhausting. Don't want to be there.
Battery levels pop flat.
Yeah, don't want to be there. The sad thing for that relationship, because she's now an ex, is the fact that I could have achieved the same outcome. We could have, as a pair, worked towards a common goal, and I could have selected. If I had known about identities at that time, I could have forged and selected an identity that was conducive both to the outcome and as a true expression of me, rather than taking on something that she wanted me to be. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I got worn out. So as I was clicking into my own identity, I was coming to the place slowly in the relationship that I had to recognize I can't do this anymore. I have to be true to who I am. I didn't necessarily communicate that well. So as I was standing true in my own identity, what that did for her was seem like I was rejecting her, because she was kind of prescribing a way that I needed to be. So
Mm.
we had this division in me coming to my true identity. It was estranging her, because now who are you? I no longer fitted the picture that she had imagined. Now, what was ironic in that for me is who she wanted me to be didn't work for our marriage. She had met me in my own identity, authentic identity, and I started conforming to that expectation that she had.
I relate. I
Didn't
relate.
work for either of us. So
Mm.
when I was going back to the true, my true nature, true identity, she was like, I can't, I don't know who this is. Well, I don't know
Mm.
how you can say that, because this is who I really was in the beginning. She perceived that as being a rejection of who she was. So yeah, I think I could have handled that better. You say you can relate, you identify in terms
Mm.
of not being
Absolutely.
true.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's across a range of different relationships. I think I've been speaking about being divinely authentically me since probably about 2005. And what I really understand in terms of what you're saying is that in as much as there is the me in my truth, there is the me in my pseudo truth, because it is a truth that serves a function of being a truth for a
Serves a
while.
function. Yeah, yeah.
whether that's a function of protection, whether that's a function of adaptation, it doesn't matter. It's still become part of the truth of how I am displaying myself to others. And this is where the truth can become quite fudgy, because the thing for me around this is that I've been all those things. And it's not about the judgment. It's not about going, okay, well, you've been right or wrong, because that immediately brings judgment. It's not about whether I am good or bad, polarizing again into the either or. I truly believe that each one of us shows up the best way that we know how with what we have at the time. And in any relationship, whether you're talking about a spouse, a partner, whether you're talking about children and raising children, whether you're talking about a working relationship, familial relationship, there is always this coming together of two identities. And I know for you, for me as well, is that we wouldn't have the clarity that we have today in being able to really nail it, that it was identity issues that were actually at the root of the challenges that we were dealing with. I just knew in my body when I was feeling authentic and when I wasn't. And then based on the feedback that I was getting, in order to feel like I was connected or feel that I was, I wouldn't even say being authentic, I would give away and leech away my energy all the time into that, if only I did X, Y, Z, then perhaps, it'll be what I had idealized it, what I had expected it to be. So there's a whole heap of personal responsibility in what we're saying about what tires we're putting on the truck or not, and whether we are utilizing, running that spare wonky tire way past its sell-by date. And only we can be the judge of that. And for me, what the analogy that you've used today really pinpoints me back to what is my role and my responsibility, A, to myself, and B, to the people that I'm engaging with. So I think that's also, there's a caution in what we're saying here today, and that is that we're not expecting effect, because that's not what it's about. It's about peeling away the veils. In the case, and I use veils as an analogy for women. I know masks are a little bit more or helmets are a little bit more apropos to men. But it's around peeling away those pseudo identities that have served a purpose, because they did. For me, they served to protect me in many instances, and it extended into even carrying extra weight, so that I didn't have to get involved in relationships. It kind of served. Well, I wouldn't say get involved in relationships. It was the fact that I could hide myself away, as opposed to being about somebody else. So, at the end of the day, while we've got the truck and the 18-wheeler, I'm still the person putting the tires on the truck. And that's my responsibility. And yes, people come in as mirrors to teach us where, not only where we're being authentic and in our truth, but also where we've taken on the pseudo-truth. And we like to hold them responsible. We like to blame them, because it's the easy way out whilst perhaps we're in pain. But ultimately, the only way through it is through it. And the only way through to growth is to actually come to recognize my true identity, recognize my soul code, that I'm part of consciousness, that I have an identity, I have pseudo identities, and it's to bring all of that into unity. And that's what allows me to truly embrace and connect with who I am in all facets of who I am, light and shadow. And it's about learning to walk in both aspects of truth, because we want to deny that. We don't want people to see our, the skeletons of who we think we are. We don't want people to know that. We want people to think that we're just wonderful and we've got it all together. Well, not life. Well, we can hide. We can hide, and the lies that we tell ourselves.
We can hide. And there is a place of recognizing that wonky tire, that biscuit wheel, serves a function, but at some point you're going to pull into the service station and you are going to take that wheel off and you're going to put one that is fit for purpose on there. And that's the key, is the roles that we are selecting for ourselves must be fit for purpose.
Absolutely.
Or is it fit for our purpose? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
And the grounds for manipulation and all sorts of dysfunction, if they fit for our purpose rather than the grander purpose.
And
so
really slot into the grand purpose. Use that biscuit wheel until you're understanding where you're going. what is the ultimate aim here, and then you select roles based on that. So coming back to the inevitability of the identities, or of the roles for that matter, is how, if I'm putting wheels that are facing in opposite directions and they're all different sizes, that vehicle becomes difficult to manage.
Yep.
So I want to be selecting tires that complement one another. I want to select roles that complement one another, that are all aligned to my greater purpose, all moving in unison, because I think at the end of the day, it's unison within myself in order,
Yeah.
for you and I to function as a unity. If I'm multi-personality Jack, in the bad way, and I'm coming into this entity, because I think the way you and I get together, you've got an identity and a personality. You are a
Yep.
person in your own right. I've got an
Yep.
identity and personality in their own right. When that comes together, that is shaping a new personality and identity.
A
And
co-joined
that's
one, a
a co-
co-created.
co-creating one. And that's what
Yeah.
happens in businesses and organizations, is we want to force a culture on people, not realizing that what they bring is actually going to contribute to that culture.
Absolute. Without
You
a
look at a
question.
soccer team, each person in the soccer team, they play different positions. There are different roles and functions,
Yep.
but they're working towards a common goal. So you and I are bringing our differences in personality, differences in character, differences in the way in which we do things, but there is a commonality. There is a common goal that we are working towards.
Towards.
So you fulfill your role and function. I fulfill my role and function. There is a unison in that, alignment in that, that takes that truck in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I
And
think
if
that
they
that comes back
alignment,
to,
it'll be easy.
that comes back to the fact that there's a commonality in, it's my favorite, one of my favorite topics, as you well know, sacred geometry. It's the union and what we share in common in our identity that allows us to
Yeah,
ride in the same cab on the same truck, as
yeah,
opposed
I love that.
to being me trying to enforce my, and we had to go through this over years.
Yeah,
We've had to go
yes,
through this, me forcing my view on you. I don't know that you did it as much to me as I did to you, and I'm saying that with my tongue in my cheek. But it was all part and parcel of. I mean, we would did this. We would come together and we would have some unity and unison, and then the egos, the lower nature, stuff would come in, and then we'd separate a bit, and then we'd come back together again, and then all part and parcel of our own learning and growth that
yeah,
we had to go through to shed, to identify our own true natures, those pseudo selves that we hid behind, in order to come to a place where we can now really move forward from our higher selves, not from our ego selves. And that's
yeah,
taken an enormous amount of work on behalf of both of us to get to this point where, and what's really significant around this is that it's when we're in our pseudo selves that things like conflict occur, things like
yeah,
competition, things like
yeah,
comparison.
yeah,
Those are the things that become symptomatic of the wonky wheel.
yeah,
And until we've addressed the wheel, we don't get past the symptoms. The other thing
yeah,
that I also wanted to say, which is critical in terms of the understanding that's evolving, is that when I come back to my soul code, and for anybody who's interested, those are things that are embedded in your date of birth, time of birth, the names that you were born with, and for those who are interested, astrological charts and all of those things. That soul code is also embedded with the gifts and the talents and the strengths that we have. Those become the mechanisms. It's almost like the oil in the engine, if we're carrying on with the truck engine, with the truck analogy. Those are the things that keep the engine turning, the petrol, the gas, are the gifts and the talents that each one of us
yeah,
have. Not everybody's going to be the driver of the truck. Not everybody's going to be the mechanic that fixes it. Not everybody's going to be the one who loads the cargo on the back of the truck, because we all have different roles to play based on the gifts and talents that we have. And this poses for me the
yeah,
challenge that most organizations face today, is because they're so busy imposing their identity on
yeah,
individuals that individuals are forced to take on a pseudo identity instead of bringing the very best of who they are. Because it's all about command control. It's all about right, wrong. It's all about that polarization that we spoke about in terms of the conflicting singular roles that we have when we're
yeah,
sitting in that lower nature space. So,
Absolutely. Within an organization, I don't want a whole bunch of me's running around.
correct. But you'd
If
be
I
surprised the number. Sorry, John. You'll be surprised the number of leaders who do want a
who
number of
do,
them.
yeah, exactly. And then I look at the soccer team and I say, well, we can't all be goalkeepers. So if I'm on the team and I'm a goalkeeper, I don't want to have, and I don't want to appoint a whole team of goalkeepers.
No.
I want defenders. I want attackers. I want, midfield guys. So there is a unison in terms of we are working towards a common goal, but I'm not looking for carbon copies. And that's the same within me. Now you bring that whole soccer team and you put it inside one body. There is a whole host of different identities and personalities that are all designed or should be designed to work towards a common goal, to work towards achieving one singular outcome.
Yeah.
The difficulty comes in is when we don't define those identities. We just allowing random spectators to come off the stadium and get on the pitch and play with us.
Like the typical dad on the sideline of the game yelling at his poor kid. He's screaming
Yeah,
and yelling because he's vicariously living his own identity through that child. And the child might, like me, have 2 left feet on the sports field. And no amount of yelling is going to actually help at all from the sideline.
yeah, exactly. Now you've got that within yourself. We don't allow que sera, sera, whatever will be as a perspective around our identities, which I think for most people that has been the case.
Yeah.
So then there is inevitability, knocking my cup off the table. It is going to fall to the floor and break. It is the inevitability. I'm struggling with that word myself now, of misaligned wheels. And the thing with wheels that are out of sync with the rest, if they, the wheel alignment, they talk about the toe and the pitch is incorrect, that tread on that tire wears off a lot quicker.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the strain that roll is taking just says to me, it's not pointing in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are not experiencing the ease and the flow, then that says to me there's a problem
Yeah,
within an
absolutely.
identity or a collection of identities, that there is a problem.
Yeah. I think that this episode is going to push buttons for a number of people in terms of, as you're listening to this, and I know that even in the conversations that we've had we've had our own buttons pushed as we've gone through this ourselves. Yeah, teehee. But it really is around, and the message that I think we'll be really coming to you with through this is the acknowledgement of our oneness, the acknowledgement of the whole, the unity. John talks about unison, the unity of who we are, of those roles. It's like so for me, another analogy is like an orchestra conductor. You can either have screeching different instruments playing all over the show, and that can be in my own head, my own noise, or it can be the screeching of instruments that we're playing in a. If you've ever been to a drumming session, when people sit for the first time drumming, the drums are all out of kilter. And a few times over and over again, all of a sudden, everybody starts to be playing in tune. And that's exactly the same around these identities that we're talking about, whether they are so-called pseudo, whether they are, because they're still reflecting an element of truth to us. Whether they are our true identities. It's really about coming into oneness, and in the oneness being aware of when we step out of our authenticity and when we don't. And we know. We don't even need anybody to tell us, because we can feel it in our bodies. We can feel those wonky, squirrely feelings that are sitting in the middle of our chest or in our upper solar plexus. We know when we've stepped outside of our truth. And for whatever the reason, there's no judgment at all around this, because I know I've done it plenty times in my lifetime. And really, this is the joy of the journey. The joy of the journey is coming back to the awareness of knowing that not only do we show up the best way that we know how at the time, because some people go through horrendous and horrific experiences. I mean, let's face it, we're dealing with some issues, the global world, around the world, gender-based violence being one of them, addiction, drug addiction, human trafficking, all of these ailments and illnesses that show a world in an identity that is in crisis. And this is where our message really comes to, is that when we are coming into oneness with self, alignment and connection to our higher natures, to our soul, to God, And that's all we have to do and be is in ourselves, and carrying that message in how we be and do and show up in our world. That's when we start to have an impact. So if you're in a situation where you're feeling squirrely, keep listening to the Living Truth dialogues and discussions. Keep plugging into the upcoming episodes. We are, at this point in time, I'm hesitant always to say what we're dealing with next week because of what comes up for us in our own journey.
What we would like it to be and what it's going to be.
And that's about being in flow and being flexible and adaptable. And I think if there's any two skills that anybody needs to adopt in the world today, it's about the adaptability and flexibility in whatever's going on around us, and not getting sucked into and drawn into the drama of where the pseudo identities want to go to.
Exactly.
Because that's all it is. It becomes this massive big drama, energy wasting, whereas we can make different, and it comes back again to choice. It comes back to the choices that we make, the awarenesses that we have about ourselves, and how easily we are able to then recognize what's going on and recalibrate back into being and living the truth of who we're meant to be.
Yeah.
So,
love it.
Final comments from you.
Good conversation.
Always. Any more comments from you?
Just that, salty alignments. If they are identities that have not necessarily the pseudo identities that not necessarily fit for long function, start weeding them out and replace them with identities that are fit for function.
Yep.
End goal in mind.
Yep, always. And if you don't know what the end goal is, stick with us, because that's where we're about to start moving into those kinds of conversations that matter. And also, just also a flag out, there's a lot of stuff that's going on that we are going through at the moment and processing and connecting with. There's some exciting stuff coming up as our co-identities are becoming, are melding and merging. There's certain things that, as we know, John is really, really good at. There's other things that I'm really good at. And there's a co-join space where we come together, and the stuff that's happening in that co-join space is just incredible. So stick with us. Join us next week as we bring to you another Living Truth dialogue. Much love, much light. And you can find us on Facebook. You can find us. We now have a proper, what is that thing called? Spotify channel called Living Truth. We also now have our video channel, Living Truth, and we'll put the links for you in the show notes from today's session. So thanks for being with us.
It was fun. Thank you.
As always, quite serious topics. We didn't laugh quite so much today. Okay, but this is kind of serious. But anyway, lots of love and light, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Thank you for tuning into Living Truth. Our goal is to carry a message of purpose and meaning to those who are seeking to be, do, and have a full, joyous, happy, and abundant life. If you know of any dreamers, truth seekers, visionaries, light workers, and wisdom keepers who would benefit from our content, please feel free to share our material with them. We would appreciate your time in leaving us a 5-star review on this channel. And visit us on www.angelajames.co.za and John Asher on www.mindmattermatters.com.